My name is Vivien Doucette. If you don't know that by now, I'd be slightly concerned. For my senior thesis / TED Talk, my research question is, what are the philosophies of the Beat Generation and how did they influence their styles? I first came to the Beat Generation actually in one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite bands. Unfortunately, I can't play you a snippet of the song because it's inappropriate for school. But anyways, my real first true experience with the Beats was this past November during Thanksgiving break. My stepmom took my dad and I through San Francisco. She was kind of just showing us the places that she used to like to hang out in college. She brought us to this place called Haight Street, the Haight-Ashbury District. And if you don't know what the Haight-Ashbury District is, it's a really famous neighborhood in San Francisco where a lot of the free love movements of the 60s kind of started up. This is a very nice picture of the area. It's not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing place to the eye. It's super chaotic, it's a little dirty, does not smell that good. And if you know me, usually you'd see this place and think, oh God, Vivien would hate that. Like, oh, that's so messy, that's so dirty, that's so hectic, and I would hate it. But for some reason, when I was in that neighborhood, I felt super at comfort and peace, which is weird because it's a city, and I kind of hate cities. So we're in this neighborhood, and we're walking down the street, and there's people everywhere. It smells bad, and I found myself taking the lead. My stepmom and dad are both very tall. I'm this tiny little kid walking through the places, acting like I own the place. I was super comfortable. I don't know why. And we came into a bookstore. I found a bookstore and saw, okay, it's books. I like books. It smelled like old books, stale patchouli, and grossness. But it was a really nice little bookstore. And I'm in there and I'm just flipping through random books and found my favorite copy. And I see this reddish-orange book catch my eye. And I want to say when I saw that book, there was ethereal light and angelic choir and everything all made sense. It was more like oh, hey, I heard about that book once. So I put down the copy of Dorian Gray and I picked it up. I was like, okay, I have 10,000 books on my desk that I haven't read. I should just buy another one. So I bought the book and I'm walking out of the store and I grab it out of my bag and my dad looks at me, looks at the book, looks at me again, laughs and makes a snarky comment. Of course you bought Kerouac in San Francisco. So, who are the Beats, who is Jack Kerouac, and why do they love San Francisco? And how is someone like me, a super homely, super quiet, kind of tame person, obsessed with these people who were exactly the opposites? The Beats were fathered by 3 people. They were a large group of people, but they consisted of 3 people that kind of focused around. This is Jack Kerouac. This is not working. Oh, now it is. There it is. Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and William Burroughs. These are some of their fellow people / friends. Neil Cassidy, who I consider to be kind of a muse of Jack Kerouac, and Gary Snyder. So these people, these men, were disenfranchised romantics who had experienced and felt the pain of World War II and the Great Depression. They all had felt that they were victims of what they considered to be a broken society. At this time, America was going through the Cold War. This is in the 40s and 50s, and we were in lock with the Soviet Union. And they felt that because of this, there was less meaning in life. They felt that the capitalism and just the general, everything just did not make sense, and they felt super, super lost and beaten down. Therefore, they called them the Beats. I connected with the Beats and their philosophies, because first of all, there are looming decisions in my life that are life-changing right now, and I think you guys all know that. We're at the end, and their philosophies, their philosophies helped me find some sense, which is kind of weird because they make no sense in the first place. My biggest issue in this project was trying to turn their poetry and their literature into coherent tangible thoughts because let's just say they were not the most sober people. When I took these philosophies and I discovered that they're super, even today, it's been 60 plus years since most of these people were at their heyday. The only one who's still alive is Gary Snyder. And they're still coherent today and they still make sense today because they're timeless. The ideas that they presented are timeless. So I'm presenting two of their main philosophies. They have a ton, which I struggled with narrowing down because there are so many of them. So I kind of found the two principal philosophies of the beats. Their first one is it. In quotation marks, it. It is a thing. And to describe it was what I believe kind of one of the one of the main purposes of the beats. They wanted to describe it. And I am not very good with words, so instead of describing it and telling you what it is, I'll explain to you my moment of it. I was camping with friends in April. It was really cold, really bad idea. And I had woken up at like 5:30 in the morning because it was just too cold and I just couldn't do it. And I was walking by myself in the woods, and I remember just looking up and seeing the stars. And as somebody who's constantly thinking and like never stops thinking about the future, in that moment when I was looking at the stars, I felt like eternity had stopped, time had stopped, and everything was just in that moment. I don't know if you guys have like those moments where you think like, oh, that was like my it, that everything stops, and time and thoughts just stop. So, to further explain it, I have a little bit of a video. This is from the movie adaptation of On the Road, and it's a little bit long, but this is kind of. They were huge into the jazz music scene as kind of one of their ways of finding it. Those are the two main characters. Actually quoted part of this thing from the scene in the book in my thesis. They were obsessed with jazz, which is one of their only ways of finding it that I agree with as something safe and
even though we witnessed right there, second, that tenor man has it. See, he starts with the first chorus, lines up his ideas, rises to his fate, and then suddenly, somewhere in the chorus, he gets it. Everybody looks up and knows. Time stop. He has to blow across bridges and come back with such infinite feeling for the tune of the moment that everybody knows it's not a tune that counts, but it. Baby, can I buy you that drink? Take that drink.
So.
All right. Thanks. What's the name?
Just click to the next
Don't
slide.
make my name.
So that's kind of part of it. They had a lot of different ways of finding it. Unfortunately, they use drugs and alcohol as a major way of finding it, but they also use things such as jazz and Zen Buddhism. So that was the first main philosophy that I discovered. The second is authenticity. Authenticity. So, to be able to find it, they believed that you had to be completely authentic, that everything had to be authentic. This is because the only way that it would be able to survive and hold is if there was nothing in your way stopping you. They were often very critical of Western organized religion. They were very critical of governments because they did not want anything to get in the way of them finding that moment. They were so focused on authenticity that they ended up just doing what at the time they were considered crazy. They up and left their families and traveled the US. They were very wild, they partied every night, but this was not immoral because, I mean, could be considered immoral, but it was not, it was justified through their philosophies. Whether or not you can justify it through your own philosophy, it's questionable, but they thought this lifestyle was okay. They justified it through they justified it through authenticity. Without it and authenticity, the Beats would not have been able to live the lifestyle that they lived. They lived such wild lifestyles, and even reading through On the Road, you are left confused and like, okay, what's going on? Because they were trying to find it. My biggest struggles with this project were, again, trying to form these cohesive, like these abstract and lofty thoughts into a cohesive thing. If anyone saw my annotated copy of Howl, the poem by Allen Ginsberg, which is super famous, it looked like a unicorn threw up on it because I had to annotate so deeply to understand what was going on. And same with On the Road and The Dharma Bums, both by Jack Kerouac. I struggled immensely with kind of taking these lofty ideas and bringing them back down. And it showed in my first thesis, there was 2 of them, that these ideas were so lofty I had to pull them down back to earth. Another issue that I had was trying to better understand these things without going crazy. Because a lot of this thought was very deep, existential, like everything's gonna die, we have no point stuff, and I had to like go through it and like not have like a crisis, which was definitely difficult. These men definitely had multitudes of crises, and I believe that's kind of why they also tended to drink themselves to death. The best part about this project, I think, that I've learned about myself is, first of all, that I shouldn't write theses when I'm in Phoenix, the dance competition, and that I am actually, despite the fact I'm interested in the Beats, but I do not agree with them. I agree with them on their philosophies, but in the way that they found it and authenticity, I am a little hesitant about because it destroyed some of their lives. Neil Cassidy's family, who he was kind of the main character in On the Road, he had 3 wives, married all of them at one point. His kids never really got to meet him. Jack Kerouac drank himself to death and died watching Beverly Hillbillies on a couch. Every single one of them, I want to find it, and I want to help other people find it, but I do not want them to find it in the same way the Beats did. I guess the best thing about this project that I just like really am excited about is continuing on. You can read everything about the Beats. You can go through all their poetry. You can read Raul Sanraz and all this stuff, and you still cannot understand them. They are not something that's easily understood, and I find that so interesting to me. Their philosophical ideas, which I am so interested in, carry you throughout all the time. And now I know how to put that moment when I see those stars into words. That's it. It's hard to explain, but that's it. So I implore you guys to think about your moment of it and how you found that moment, and to like continue carrying that moment on, because that gives us a little bit more meaning to our lives. We are so, human nature is so weird, and it's so hard to understand. But I feel like the Beats here have kind of given us something to grab in the dark. You may not agree with it, you may not like it, but it's something. And that's super important coming forward, especially as young people. That's why the Beats are still so famous, is because young people, and because it lives on through the disenfranchisement and the finding of it. And it also comes through in Angry Allen. So going through social movements, he kind of pushed a lot of the free love movement and kind of started to get the ball rolling on that, and kind of turned into the power and the love of the 50s and 60s. So that was my TED Talk.
Great, thanks, Vivien. All right, we're going to open it up to questions from both the panel and from our audience members. So,
I'm just gonna sit down. Ankles bothering. Kyle.
So, you talked about your moment of it, and you talked about how these people went through different methods of finding their moment of it, and you mentioned that you didn't agree with those. So I'm curious on what are some methods that you take to find your moment of it?
I'm gonna say dance. I know I have a very difficult relationship with dance, but I always, when I think about those moments of it, it's also tends to be on stage, and also just through I find that when I hang out with my friends, and I went to Chinese food on Friday night, and there was a moment I was laughing super hard, and I felt time stop. So just little things like that, going to Chinese food with your friends or dancing on stage. It's kind of how I've developed. Lori.
what does authenticity mean to the Beats, and why did this search for authenticity lead them into these behaviors that we sort of find socially unacceptable?
Well, first to address, I think that they were socially unacceptable at the time during kind of the more, not conservative, but the more fundamental. But I think their authenticity to them meant that they could be who they were without anybody or anything stopping them. And authenticity was the real, true reality without anything else bothering them. And I'm not just talking about religion or governments, but thoughts and what we conceive and think as is reality.
Why was that so important to them?
They were confused. I think they were confused and lost, and they felt slightly, they just didn't like what was given to them. They didn't find pleasure in what was presented, and they just wanted to look for something more. They wanted more in life than living a basic American life. They just wanted more. They always wanted everything at once, which is a quote from On the Road. Mom?
So when you talk about how they didn't really believe in government, how would you compare their belief as far as maybe anarchist compared to maybe today's liberal, or not, libertarianism?
They were kind of that was on my first paper was kind of covering anarchy. They were definitely more interested in anarchy than they were libertarian. William Burroughs was libertarian, I believe, but they believed that government should not be based on somebody coming down and saying what to do, but more on a community, eros kind of, everyone should just be doing the right thing. So they believed that if they took away the government and kind of put anarchy, that human nature would naturally just say okay, let's all be good to each other. Whether or not that would have happened, we don't know. But
do you think that's possible through the finding of it and through authenticity?
I want to say yes, but that's a very lofty thing. I think if that would have happened, if they really had made that happen, there would be, their heavy drug and alcohol references and usage kind of make me hesitant about that, and maybe finding it in ways that weren't so destructive to themselves and their families. So, Libby.
One of the things that I really struggle with the Beats is that they come across to me as somewhat self-indulgent and misogynistic.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that with being inspired by them?
Definitely a difficulty for me, trying to go through this and okay, I really don't agree with this, this is misogynistic, or how much of this is actually pretentious bullcrap. But I've kind of had to reconcile with that at the time, especially with the misogynistic. At the time, they were more concerned with themselves because of the authenticity. But at the same time, I feel like they would have, if they would have continued on, they kind of started to sputter out after Jack Kerouac's death. The entire Beat generation started sputtering out, and they're still alive. There's still Beat authors and artists today. But I feel like if they wouldn't have been so, again, focused on the drugs and alcohol, maybe they would have been a little less self-indulgent, and I really hope that their free love movement kind of would have made them realize their misogynistic ways and views. That's one thing I struggled with the Beats, was like finding female Beat authors who, there was only like 2 or 3 of them that I can think of, and one of them died at the hands of William Burroughs accidentally. So, yeah.
Time for one more question.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no,
Did you have
go
one?
for it.
I was just gonna say, what advice would you give? I was actually about 17 years old when a copy of On the Road found its way into my life, and that is how it happens too. It's you stumble upon it. What advice do you give to a 17-year-old who finds themselves with a copy of On the Road in their hands, and maybe this 17-year-old is in that questioning phase of life? What do you advise them?
Read it slowly, and really make sure you just read it slowly and like try to actually understand what's going on, because that's really hard. And address what they say and address your own beliefs, because it's really easy to read it and think, oh, they have the answer to everything, and that's highly not true. One of Kerouac's favorite quotes is, the only thing I have to offer is my own confusion. So I would tell that 17-year-old, that copy of On the Road, who's as lost as everybody, to understand it, but make sure that you also address your own well-being in it too.
Great. Thanks, Vivien. And if you would step outside for just a moment.